be nice for us to have a graphical representation of the difference between the two conditions within our experiment. And JASP does this when we click on the descriptive plots function, but unfortunately I noted that it doesn't provide us with the graph that we would typically expect for this type of experiment. We'd like to see a bar graph usually, and moreover it doesn't provide a graph of an APA standard. What I mean by that is it doesn't meet the conventions that have been set by the American Psychological Association, those pesky people who determine that graphs and tables need to look a certain way. So I'm going to show you how to create a graph of an APA standard within this video using Microsoft Excel. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with Excel by now. So I'm going to now switch to Microsoft Excel. So I've opened up a worksheet here, which is currently blank. And yours too, when you open up Excel, will look very familiar to this or very similar to this. And the first thing that I'm going to do is type the name of the two different conditions that we're interested in within our experiment. So I'm going to type the word healthy and unhealthy, and I've populated those there next to each other. Now it's important that they're next to each other and not beneath each other for the construction of our graph. Within our graph, what we're going to be presenting is participants' average ratings for health and unhealthy conditions. And we noted that given the type of data that we have and the analysis that we conducted, an appropriate measure of an average or the central tendency would be median in this case. So I'm going to type the word in median in this cell here. Given that we're using median as an example of the central tendency, and we noted that IQR, the interquartile range, would be an appropriate measure of dispersion, which typically accompanies the median. And we're also going to represent the dispersion of the data as well in our graph. So I'm going to type the letters IQR in this cell here. So I've simply named the two conditions that we're interested in, that we want to see in our graph. And I've simply entered in there the terms for the central tendency that's going to be represented in our graph and the measure of dispersion. Now, to find that information out, the median and the IQR, we simply need to navigate to JASP. You should know how to do this by now. We've done it in a previous video. And I'm going to close down the analysis that I've done here. I'm going to select the descriptives option. I'm going to move the healthy and the unhealthy condition into the variables box. I'm going to go down to the statistics option. I'm going to select the median option and the IQR. And we'll see within our table, populated over here, we can see that the median's been included and the IQR. So if I have a look at the median for the healthy condition, it is 7, and for the unhealthy condition, it is 5. So I'm now going to type in those numbers under the healthy and unhealthy words within Excel. So the median for the healthy condition is 7, for the unhealthy condition, it is 5. The IQR for the healthy condition within this table here is 3, and for the unhealthy condition, it is 2. So I'm going to type in the numbers 3 for the healthy condition and 2 for the unhealthy condition. And believe it or not, we now actually have all the information that we need to create our graph within Excel. So simply within those 8 cells there, we've got all the information that we need to make a graph of an APA standard within Excel. So what I'm going to next do is select these top 2 rows here. So the words healthy and unhealthy and the median and the numbers which accompany it. And then within Excel, I'm going to select insert. And I'm going to then select this graph option over here on the toolbar. So it is the bar chart or column chart option. I'm going to select the top option underneath it to the column subheading. And what we can see already is that Excel has provided us with a graph. It's already presenting us with a visual representation of the overall median ratings for participants here. So that's great to see, but we need to do a lot more to this graph to make it of an APA standard. And the first thing that we can do is to get rid of what is referred to as these grid lines in the background of the table. So you can see that there's grey lines which correspond to the different intervals on the rating scale. So if I select those grey lines and I click delete, we've got ourselves one step closer to making it to an APA standard. You shouldn't have grid lines on there typically in an APA graph. Now, you can also see on the y-axis, so where these numbers are here, there's currently no line, which is an annoying feature of Excel. We should have a clear y-axis denoted there. I'm going to show you how to address that problem. And you simply need to click on the numbers there, or near the numbers where the line should be, and go to the Format tab up here. And if we go to the Format tab, it says to us, right, you can include a line here if you want. And I'm going to select this line here so that we now have a line when we click off that part of the graph, we'll be able to see that. And I can change the color of it by going to shape outline. So if I select the color black here, which I think is the appropriate option we need, and I do the same for the y-axis, and select that option there, we can now see that our graph has a x and a y-axis, which is clearly denoted there. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we also need to make sure that our y-axis, which is currently going up to 8, will actually extend to represent the full range of the scale that participants could use. So if you remember, they could rate as high as 10, where the graph is only shown 8. So we're going to want to address that. And the way in which we can address that is by clicking on the numbers there, and then selecting Format Axes. When we do that, an option will appear over here, a window will open up, and if you look under the axes options, it's got a minimum and a maximum range. Now currently that minimum is set at 0, which is fine. The maximum is set at 8, and we're going to want to change that. So I'm going to enter the number of 10 in there as opposed to 8. And when I do that, you can see that the graph is updated with that information, which is fantastic. So our graph is getting closer and closer to being appropriate now. There's a few other things that we need to do, however. In addition to updating the range of the axes, so it represents the actual rating scale that participants used, we also want to have some titles which correspond to the axes. And what I mean by that is we don't currently know what that title, rating from 0 to 10 means. It could mean 0 to 10 seconds, it could mean absolutely anything. So we're going to want to include a title alongside this rating option here in the y-axis to denote what that actually meant. And to do that, what we're going to do is to click on this green plus arrow here on Excel. And I'm going to then, you see this other field pop open with chart elements. I'm going to then select Axes Titles. And once I've done that, what you can see there is that some Axes Titles or default templates are provided there, which I could now type in. So I could now name the Axes Titles there. Now that's a task I'm going to leave to you. I want you to have a go at doing something without me sort of directly telling you what to do. So what do you think would be an appropriate Axes title that could be used there? Given this this is the rating scale, that's something you're going to want to clearly denote. And these are the attributes down here, the different conditions. So that's something you're going to want to denote within these Axes titles. So I will leave that to you to name your Axes titles. Now, those words are looking pretty small to me at the moment, healthy and unhealthy. It could be my aged eyes struggling to see what they are, but I think it'd be better if we made that a little bigger. So if I click on those words here and I look at the font in the toolbar up here, this is pretty small. It's only size 9 at the moment. We should usually have font around 12. So I'm going to increase that to the font size of 12. And I can also do that for the numbers options here. So I'm going to increase that to 12. I can also do it for my titles as well when I've used those. So it's all consistent. And I'm going to change the font a little bit. I'm not a fan of Calibri in formal scientific writing. I think Times New Roman always looks a bit more formal, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change it to those options and make sure that it's consistent and got the font the same way through. Now, title at the top currently simply says median. Now, that doesn't mean much at all to me without an explanation. So you should also have a title of your graph as well. So what do you think would be an appropriate title for your graph? I will leave that to you so that you can have some room there to actually have some variation in your titles there, so that you can each come up with different titles to try and capture the graph in question there. So we're almost there now. Getting very close to making this an APA graph, but again, there are a few more things that we need to do. And first and foremost, what we should address next is how these actual components of the graph are presented. Now, at the moment, they're the same color. And according to the APA, we should avoid doing this for those individuals that are colorblind who may have an issue processing this. And it also doesn't look professional in some contexts, and also often in traditional format journals they aren't printed rather in color format. So we can change this to black and white, and we can do this by clicking on the bar and go into the format data point option by right clicking. And once we do this, if we see this little option pop up here, format data point, we can see a little paint bucket over here. If we click on that and we select fill, we can then play around with the color and the nature of the data point in question. So I'm going to select no fill here, so that it appears white. And I'm going to leave that as it is. For the actually, I need to make sure, important point, I need to make sure that I also select the border option and select solid line so that you can actually see it when we click off it. So if I click off it now, you can still see that option there. For unhealthy, I'm going to do the same thing. This time, rather than have them both the same color, I'm going to select pattern fill. And what I'm going to do is select an option down here, which will change the structure of the data point then. So if I select this one, it gives it a graded type feel, and I'm going to change it to the color black. And select that option there. I think that looks neater. Now again, need to make sure, before I move off that, we need to make sure that there's a border. So if I select down and click on the border option and click solid line, make sure that is also selected. Now we can see our graph is looking much better. Look at this. This is really looking like a scientific graph now. We are almost there. We need to populate those titles, the axes titles. You need to come up with a title here. So, and we need to do one other thing, and then you will have a really nice graph, a really suitable graph for your science report. We need to include and represent in some manner the measure of dispersion, so the IQR. And I'm going to show you how to do this now, something which many people often get wrong. Certainly first year and second year students will get this wrong, and even third year students typically. So I'm going to show you how to do this, and then you've got this skill for life then all the way throughout your degree. So we're going to represent the IQR, the measure of dispersion, in what's referred to as a error bar on the graph. So I'm going to select the two data points there, so I simply need to click on one and automatically select them both. I'm going to select this option here, and I'm going to go down to the error bars option here. And then when I click that, you can see it provides me with default error bars, so two little bars on the graph. But that's not what I want. It's just pasted basically two standard bars on there which represent absolutely nothing. So I now need to click on the little arrow here, and I need to go to more options. If I go on more options, you can see that this box is populated on the right hand side. If I select custom down here and select specify value, it will ask me what values do you want these bars to represent. And in this case, I want them to represent the IQR. So I'm going to select the IQR numbers 3 and 2 for my positive error value, and also for my negative error value here. You don't need to worry so much about what that necessarily consists of. You just need to know that you're making sure you select the right numbers. So if I select the negative error value here, and I select 3 and 2, I click on this button here, and then OK, we can see that those lines on the graph, the error bars, are now updated. And I can even check that they're right. I can make sure that they represent the numbers I want. I could change those just temporarily to see if I change the unhealthy number from 2 to 3, it should get bigger. And that's precisely what happens. I'm going to change that back to make sure it's accurate. And now I can see I've got a graph which is much more suitable. This looks 10 times better than the graph we started off with, and it looks 10 times better than the graph that was provided in JASP. Now you need to come up with some appropriate titles there. And once you've done that, you could then copy that in to a Word document as so. And look at this. This is looking like a proper science paper now. It has provided us with an outline of the graph there, so it stands out a little bit, but we can get rid of that. Simply right click there, or alternatively, actually a bit easier way for you is to go to format, and for the outline, to select no outline there. And look, there's no outline, looks beautiful on the page, and it's a really nice high caliber graph that you've got there, which represents the difference between the two conditions. So some really valuable skills there, which will aid you not just for this science report, but for many, many more reports that you'll be writing in the future. So I hope you find that really useful and helpful.